What's up guys, Dan here. Thanks so much for joining in for today's video. So today is an important video. I know we're going to have a lot of new sim racers in 2025, and we've probably got some people maybe who are getting back in sim racing, and then some of you watching this who have been sim racing for a long time. Now, I personally have gone in and out of this throughout the entire time that I've been sim racing, which is going on 20 years or so now. And that is sim racing burnout. Now, the past few years, I have really adapted some things that I make sure I do, and it has really helped with not getting into sim racing burnout. If you've never experienced sim racing burnout, it is a real thing. And if you have, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And more than likely, if you're relatively new and you haven't yet, at some point in time, you may encounter this burnout, and it is very real, trust me. And the problem with sim racing burnout is it's a temporary thing for the most part, but a lot of people end up selling all their gear and then wishing 6 months later or whatever that they would not have sold their gear because they actually did enjoy it and they still enjoy sim racing, but they just got burnt out. So I just wanted to make a quick video giving these 3 tips that I have implemented into my life, basically, that just helps avoid the sim racing burnout. And also, this is also a crossover if you are, and even more important probably, if you're trying to create content also in sim racing, because it compounds that effect of burnout. So these are just things that specifically, most importantly, will work for sim racing specifically, but also can cross over to content creation. So you can look at it both ways. But the first thing that I think is very important is you need to make sure you balance the time you're spending sim racing with some time doing some physical activity. Now, this may sound very basic and very crazy, but I'm telling you, it is incredibly easy to get in here into sim rig and just stay there for hours and hours and just keep racing and racing. And then before you know it, you spent a week without doing anything outside or any kind of physical activity. And then a week turns into 2 weeks, and then a month, and then so on and so forth. So have a plan set that if I'm spending 2 hours in my sim rig a day, or whatever the amount of time is, just say, if I'm going to do this, then I am going to also spend X amount of time every day doing some kind of physical activity, preferably outside. Go walk, get some sunshine. It's just great. I know that you know this. I'm not a health expert, but it's just great for your mental health and your physical health. And those two things really will contribute to any burnout of anything that you're doing a lot. And typically people who sim race do it a lot. So just make sure you're balancing your time sim racing with some physical activity, preferably outside. It really helped me a lot, and it's kept me from going in and out of sim racing burnout for the last couple of years. It really helps. Now, the second thing that took me a long time to figure out, but when I finally did, it made a big difference, and that is to try to avoid racing the exact same races over and over again, especially when you're new sim racing. Let's just take iRacing, for example, but this is a pretty common aspect of any multiplayer forward sim racing games like iRacing, but there's others that are somewhat limited in the beginning of what content you have. So you're limited. I'm just going to use iRacing for specific because that's what most people are playing over and over again. You're stuck in the rookie class. You've got the MX5. You got very few cars. You haven't paid for anything new yet, and you're running the exact same race most of the time with the exact same people over and over again. And that's all fine and dandy. But what happens is the more you do the same race over and over again, you start to run into the same people. And there's always going to be people that don't have as good as racecraft as you. And you're going to start to see those people, and they're going to start to affect your race negatively, which is going to make you very angry. And this is very, very important if you're down in the rookies all the time. But just take iRacing, out of the equation 100%. Let's just not even talk about a specific sim. Not doing the same thing over and over again is going to hugely help. Do different types of racing genres. Do open wheel sometimes, do some rally, do NASCAR, even if it's something you're not particularly into. Keep switching it up to keep things fresh. It's going to help you a lot to not go into sim racing burnout. And then the last thing that is, to me, it's kind of obvious because I've always done it, but I know a lot of people that go headfirst into sim racing get really hung up on the sim part of racing. And once they get a taste of sim racing with a wheel and force feedback and good pedals and all that stuff, you're like 100% in on the simulation aspect. And if all you're ever doing is playing sim games like iRacing or fill in the blank sim that is like hyper focused on performance and being fast as possible and getting the quickest lap times and having and being an actual competition amongst other people, that is going to get tiring and is going to contribute to burnout. So what you need to do is include some fun games as well. Include your Forza Horizons. Include any kind of games like that you can still, there's tons of games that you can still use your steering wheel and all the gear you've bought, trucking sims, BeamNG. There's all kind of games that are just fun focused first rather than competition. And it just brings the stress levels down a little bit and gives you something else to enjoy so that you're not always constantly being in direct competition with other people and listening to chat and all these things that may seem really cool and exciting at first, but eventually are really annoying and totally lead to burnout. So those are 3 tips that I have really used, honestly, and it have helped me tremendously like the last 3 years or so. And I'm just going to give a little bonus bit of information here. And I may have kind of partially mentioned this at the beginning, but one of the biggest issues that I see people doing when they go into sim racing burnout, they decide to sell all their gear. And unless you absolutely need that money for something else, don't sell your gear. Don't sell it simply because you are burnout on sim racing. Because eventually, trust me, I've done it so many times, I can't even count, I don't think on 2 hands how many times I've done this. Buy a bunch of gear, get a really good setup, race, do exactly the opposite of what I'm talking about here, get burnout, decide I don't want it, come up with some crazy reason of why I can use the money for some car part, fill in the blank, whatever, like a real world car part. And then I sell the gear and then I don't have it. And then 4 to 6 months later, I'm like, shit, why did I do that? I wish I still had all this awesome gear. And then you're back at start one and you got to rebuild your setup and stuff like that. So sim racing burnout is real. If you have not been affected by it yet, you probably will at some point, but you can follow these 3 simple kind of rules of your life or rules of gaming, I guess you could say. And hopefully they will help you out. Also, if you have any other ideas to help people, if you've experienced this and there's been other ideas or things that you've used to keep from getting burnout, please let us know in the comments below, because the more information, the better, to keep the more people racing for longer. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please click the like button, hit the subscribe if you're not, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. We'll see you later.